Welcome back to Synergy to Synastry with Christine and Renee. This is episode 7, and today we're going to be talking about yoga. But first, we want to thank you for continuing to rate and review the podcast. We also want to encourage you to keep sharing this with friends and family and to follow our podcast on the Spotify app. That way, all of our episodes will automatically download into your feed, and you'll never have to worry about listening to the next one.
Also, we wanted to urge listeners to please submit any questions that you have about the topics that we discuss week over week, as well as questions about yourself you'd like us to read into intuitively. If you'd like to be a guest on our podcast, either to discuss your metaphysical specialty, whether we've covered it or not, or to have a live reading from Christine and I, please email us at synergytosynastry@gmail.com.
Today, we're going to cover what yoga is, its historical origins, both mine and Renee's first exposure to yoga, where energy gets trapped in the body, its meaning and remedies for it, how we both engage with yoga, and whether or not we find that yoga supports spirituality, energy work, and psychic abilities. Renee, why don't you tell us a little bit about what yoga is and where it originated?
One last thing before we start the show. Please leave a review on Apple Podcasts because Christine and I are going to randomly select someone to have a free reading. We'll announce the winner on social media on the summer solstice, which is June 20th, and give them a special shout out in episode 9. We've talked about etymology on this show before. Yoga in Sanskrit means to yoke or union. What is a union but at least two entities, or in this case, states of being, coming together as one? Typically, when we think of yoga, we consider it as a union of the mind and the body through movement, through balancing poses, through breath work. Yoga has Indian roots and lots of Sanskrit terms. So, for those of you who are familiar, the classic is asana, which means pose, and many of the poses within yoga will have asana tucked at the end.
So, really quick, like Shavasana, resting pose, asana is the pose part.
Mm-hmm. And the non-Sanskrit name for Shavasana is corpse pose.
Oh, I didn't even know that.
Yeah,
Cool.
because you're just lying there, not moving. And it's a little dark, but it does make sense. So
Similar
there,
pose.
all the time when you're in yoga classes, there you tend to hear some sort of a mix of both. Some teachers do a good job of saying both names. Others only say the Sanskrit. Others only say the animal or descriptor name, if you will. The yoga practice is accredited to an Indian sage named Patanjali, who wrote the Yoga Sutra, which is a relatively well-known body of work. It's actually over 2,000 years old. Again, for some more etymology here, yoga, as we remember, means to yoke, or it means a union, and sutra means a thread. When you call it the Yoga Sutra, the name in essence means a statement of truth in the sense that it's a collective. So it's about combining of everything.
You know, the more you and I do this podcast, the more I realize how progressive my dad was. Because my first experience with yoga was in high school. My dad had started going to yoga and found this amazing teacher. Her name is Joan. Joan, if you're out there and you're hearing this, you were and always have been my favorite yoga teacher. But we started going, I think, on Thursdays, like after work and after school. And that was my first foray into a workout, but also like a mind body connection. And I thought it was amazing. And it was actually in that class that I had my first psychic experience before I knew it was a psychic experience. The class would be made up of an hour of yoga and then 30 minutes of meditation. But during the half hour of meditation, while I was in Shavasana, I would go really deep. And I didn't know I was doing it, but I knew I enjoyed it. And one time I went so deep that I felt like I was about to have an out of body experience and freaked myself out. But I was in another plane and I was seeing all of these entities and everything was gray. I was so scared. And, the voice said, she's not ready yet, and sent me back. And I kind of like opened my eyes during Shavasana and I was like, is anyone else having an experience like this? And so fast forward, God knows how many years, at least 10, 15. When I'm developing my psychic skills, we meditated and we went to the astral plane for the first time on purpose. And I got to the astral plane and I was like, this looks so familiar. That's where I went in my Shavasana, but I didn't know. And the entities that were there, everything was now in color. It wasn't in gray anymore. Everybody was smiling. And they're like, you're ready now. And it kind of like opened the gates and I went through all the levels of the astral plane and explored. But yeah, yoga, I think, was my gateway into my psychic abilities.
I got chills throughout that entire story. No, that I did not have a spiritual experience like that. My introduction to yoga had to be, divine intervention. It's one of those you look back on it and realize there's some bigger stuff at work. I was in middle school, and one of my friends at the time, I really was only friends with her in middle school. One of those local community ed books that there was going to be a yoga class offered at the high school. She asked me if I wanted to do it. For whatever reason, I agreed. I said yes. And it was a small classroom. There were maybe up to 10 people on any given week. And just remember really enjoying it, knowing I would never have thought to do this had it not been for her. And then I didn't continue to practice it. I was in middle school. Like, what do I know then? Then when I got to college, they had a few events. It was like a black light event. It was the craziest class I've ever been to. Like the lights were off and then like things were flashing. There was like an epilepsy thing you had to sign. The music was bumping. It was so loud. It was like a rave, but it was a yoga class. It was crazy. But I took yoga classes. So my first semester or two, and then also my senior year. Those were, again, introductions. I saw it in the course book. I knew I needed to take different electives. I thought this would be great to fit into my schedule. It's built in exercise. How I felt was every time that I would pick up the practice again, I felt so connected to it that it just worked for me. I liked that there was so much range in what you could do. It's not high impact. It's not let's hop on a treadmill and run for an hour or, lift 300-pound weights. I fell out of it again. And then COVID happened and I got into a really, really good routine, the best practice that I've ever had, where I was doing yoga in the morning and after work and sometimes before bed. And I did that for a couple months straight. I don't know. It was winter and I was cold and I kind of lost the zest for it and the motivation to do it. And so I fell out of it again. Fast forward to 2023, I was really itching to get back into a practice because I just started noticing I had so much tension built up in my body. And I still have issues with that, but it's been getting better. And I tried to introduce that in my relationship, or I'll go over here and you do yoga and like you do that. And I was starting to do that a little bit. And then by the time that we broke up, I got home and I was like, all right, here's a better opportunity. Let's actually get into a yoga practice. So I don't do it every day, but I have been doing it pretty consistently for the last, I guess like over 6 months now. So off and on, there's some stretches where things come up and I didn't do it, but I do something, some days more than others. But it's also come up in a few readings that I've had where a couple different psychics have said that to me, of specifically recommending that I do yoga because there's something nourishing about it for the work I'm supposed to be doing, the healing I'm supposed to be doing, and then our discussion with Lisa, how I need to be moving energy in and out of my body because there's different types of yoga. It engages with that energy movement. If you're doing something that's faster, does that really work for you? Are you trying to ground? So it's something that clearly has been presented to me and it has kept coming back over and over and over again. And honestly, I think in some ways it was yet another piece in the puzzle to kind of get me over to some of the more spiritual work because you learn about meditation and what does every psychic reading have? You're getting in meditation. So it kind of got me at the doorstep, but then also as a supportive practice.
One of my favorite things about your story, the friend in middle school who got you into it, and then you guys weren't friends after, it's so interesting because I was going back to some of our coursework yesterday and how relationships sometimes serve a purpose and then that's it. No hard feelings, but the relationship served its purpose and now it's gone. And that happened for you in middle school. I don't know, I found it so profound the way that unraveled.
Oh, yeah, totally. And I realized that probably by the time I got to college, because I would look back and go, oh, well, yeah, we were friends for a few years, but that was such a significant thing that came out of it, of
Hmm.
just the knowing that it was out there and it was something that I could do, or that would be challenging, but also in some ways gentle. Kind of related, I was mentioning tension being in my body. So, of course, with yoga, we want to talk about energetics, to build off of the conversation that we had with Lisa, but
Hmm.
also just on the physical side, if you're somebody who wants to improve flexibility, wants to improve balance, coordination, there's a lot that yoga can offer to support that.
This is something I have definitely found to be true. Our energy can get trapped in our body, and yoga really does help us move that energy around in different ways. We found that research suggests certain emotions can be trapped in specific areas of the body. So for me, I know I have energy trapped in my hips and in my shoulders, which for hips tend to be stress and fear, for shoulders tend to be fear and anxiety. But there's also anger can be held in your head and chest, disgust can be held in your mouth and stomach, sadness in the throat and chest, anxiety in the chest and gut area, shame in the face and chest. But the good news is joy can be felt everywhere. So if you're feeling your body and there are some pain points that you're feeling right now, you can kind of think, what emotion is being trapped in there? And next time you do yoga, you can sort of focus on it, listen to that emotion and see what it's trying to tell you. Perpetual energy trapping can present as muscle tension, exhaustion, a lump in the throat or constant coughing in the throat, choking, pain, nausea, teeth grinding, IBS, etc. I kind of feel like any sort of ongoing chronic pain that you have that could be a result of stress is sort of energy that's trapped in your body. I for sure can relate to this. Which leads us to exercise, and especially yoga and meditation are some of the top recommendations from peer-reviewed research to reverse these physical, mental, and emotional ailments. Now, caveat, this does not replace going to the doctor and finding out what is wrong with you and getting medication if you need it, but it can be used as a supplement. I want to ask you, Renee, how do you engage with yoga and moving all of this energy around your body?
I definitely relate to some of that energy trapping, or I'm familiar enough with doing yoga over the years to know the exact spots in my body that tend to be tighter than others. And it's both of my hips, but especially my left hip, and it's my lower right back and my shoulders and neck. And some of that stuff you go, okay, neck and shoulders or wrists, that's from working on a computer or using your phone, or hips can be from sitting a lot. To do this work, to have this practice, is also a way of tuning into just how your body works and feels. The more that you're engaging with it in trying to align in certain poses, you're following what the teacher's doing. You inadvertently and unintentionally become more aware of how your body is positioned in your day to day. So you start carrying yourself a little bit differently, or you're a little bit more cognizant of what might be triggering tension or a buildup. You become a little more tapped into when tension is rising. Oh, I have to release that. I can feel that here. So it's in another way a mindfulness practice, just doing it off the mat, because you start feeling into your body and your muscles more. Typically, I engage with yoga with yoga challenges. There's a lot of good yoga teachers out there online and on YouTube. One of the most popular ones is Yoga with Adriene. I'll also recommend Yoga with Cassandra. I've started doing her videos. I heard about her in a podcast, and she talked about doing a lot of yin yoga, which I've found to be particularly supportive. I looked her up. She has also a ridiculous amount of content, and she has 30-day challenges just as Adriene does. Another reason I want to recommend her is she also includes some of these spiritual elements and even things that we've talked about in the podcast. So I've noticed in the last year or so, she's put out content inspired by the elements, inspired by all of the zodiac signs, the equinox. I actually just did recently the spring equinox practice. It was really great, and it was one of those exactly what I needed. And she has a good range of some videos that are 5 or 6 minutes and others 30, 50 minutes or more. And that's typically what I do. I have done in person classes. As I mentioned, I did that one in middle school, I did some in college. Prior to COVID, good routine going with my sister and some friends. And there was a bar room in the town I used to live in. Every month, they would have yoga instructors from a local studio come into the bar room. It was $15, and you would get an hour long yoga class and then a beer. It was an incredible deal. So we would do that, and they would have a pretty good turnout, and they had different teachers every time, and most of the time they were really good. I think there was only one teacher where we didn't love it. And then we would just sit there and we would talk and hang out. There's a lot of bar rooms that still do this. I've seen one that's maybe a town over from where I am now that does this. I haven't been, but that is popular. I'll also recommend Insight Timer. That is free classes that you can sign up for. It'll just put it in your calendar, and you're not on video, they're not seeing you, but you can be in a class, if you will, with the teacher. And you can send them questions or say, I have tension here, and then they'll work it into the practice for that day. So there's digital options, there's pre-recorded digital options, there's of course going to a studio, which I haven't done in some time, and then the bar room ones. I recommend just finding what works for you, and I've done all of them at some point. And currently what works for me is doing the pre-recorded videos or latching onto challenges. The challenges are a good motivator because it gets sent to your inbox. You're crossing it off. I love to cross something off my list. So that has helped me kind of keep up with it or make sure that it's in my routine. What about you?
I love all that. And of course, I can relate to some of the stuff you said, specifically about like where you find your pain. Like mine's in my neck, my shoulder, my hip, all on the right side. And I had been seeing an acupuncturist for a while who told me that your right side tends to be your future or your masculine side, and your left tends to be your past and your feminine side. So a lot of the pain that I had been feeling, and this made sense considering the year that I had last year, was worrying about my future, stress and anxiety about my future. Going into how I engage with yoga, I, at this point, aim to do some sort of restorative yoga twice a week. I love yin yoga. And rule number one, no touching of the hair or face. Yin yoga is very low to the floor, and it encourages you to hold your poses for a very long period of time and not move. It allows me to sit with my body in a pose and feel where the tension is and sort of talk to it and engage with it, and also feel it release because you're holding the pose for so long that you can feel how your muscles interact with it and you can feel the release happening. So I really enjoy that. I also take restorative yoga classes and weekend wind down yoga at Equinox. I really enjoy it, and I like doing it late on a Sunday. It really preps me for the week. What I learned during the pandemic was that I like being in a class with other people. Feeding off of the energy from the teacher and the other people in the class is part of the experience for me. So if you can find a yoga studio that you love, go for it and support it and do all the things with it. For me, yoga is really about healing my body, the mental and the physical. I don't use yoga solely as a physical workout. I strength train and do other things for that, but I think yoga is important as a practice.
So we've talked a little bit about the physical side benefits and how we engage with yoga, but this is an intuition heavy podcast. So we want to dive a little further into the connection. Christine, what's an example of how you find that yoga supports spirituality and your psychic abilities?
When I channel regularly, I have to sit in meditation before I can channel anything and be a clear conduit for whatever I'm reading. With yoga, I find that doing the yoga practice just puts me into a different state. And once I get to the point where we're sitting in Shavasana, I'm already in that meditative space where I can just start receiving messages easily.
I think part of what you're describing is actually another manifestation of how yoga ties to energetics, which is the energy is flowing through your body. Obviously, there's other practices that are physical and spiritual. Tai Chi is one of them. It's a practice of actually moving energy, but you're moving your body at the same time. So yoga isn't necessarily, and for people who just go to a studio or taking a class, they're not necessarily thinking about it, nor is a teacher leading the practice talking about feel the energy move from here and there. That doesn't really happen. They're saying focus on your breath and timing it to the movement, which is most common when you're in a vinyasa or flow class. Those tend to be some of the more intensive. You could be doing a certain cycle or salutation 15 times in a row. And in order to get through that, you are linking, remember, yoga is a union. You're linking the movement of your body with your breath and also the mental stamina to get through it, to keep going. Your breath is supporting you getting from one pose to the next pose to the next pose to the next pose. And it's very intentional. Same as if you were at the gym and you're doing reps. You're supposed to inhale and exhale at certain points when you're lifting and lowering the weights. You do the same thing in a vinyasa class. You can feel that in the sense that you're working up some sweat, you're generating heat in your body, and you can view it just from the strictly physiological lens. But also, there's something about the energy in your body, or if you feel a sense of expansion, that's like that joy that Christine was talking about at the beginning. If you're feeling joy, if you're feeling openness that's in your whole body, you probably have actually tapped into something else and you're connecting intuitively and you're a little bit more open and receptive, which sets you up to then sit in meditation or lay in Shavasana and become that channel, which does make a lot of sense. And of course, this can happen from doing other types of yoga. It doesn't have to be flow. And the other piece as well, to tie back to our conversation with Lisa, is specifically focus on your chakras. If you want to engage in the energetics when you're doing a yoga practice, there are countless videos out there, poses that are activating your throat chakra or your heart chakra. Like you'll hear the classic, it's a heart opener pose, like fish pose. There's certain asanas that you can leverage if you are trying to pair this with spiritual and energetic work. And you say, I know I have a blockage. I went to a Reiki session or I got a reading done and I have a blockage here. Well, you could do a daily yoga practice for X amount of time and you're focusing on opening up or activating those certain chakras. So all of this stuff can really be interconnected and help with your healing process.
We discussed the value of mindfulness in episode 1, and mindfulness in the sense of we hear something from our intuition and we immediately write it off because why would we be receiving messages? Yoga is a practice, and part of that practice is the practice of receiving messages for yourself. You don't have to be somebody who reads other people psychically. You can use yoga as a practice to be more connected with yourself, your intuition, so that when you're out in the real world, next time you get a hit, you hear it more. It's a bit louder than it once was because you're now more used to listening to your body or listening to your intuition. So, to recap everything that we've discussed in this episode, yoga is a practice that can be used to connect your mind and your body. For our listeners who are looking to develop their intuition or get involved in yoga in general, we suggest either starting online and or find a local yoga studio near you and start with taking the beginner classes. And by doing that, you can learn how to properly move your body within yoga and also try out the different teachers and see what teacher resonates with you, because I do find that the teacher who leads the session is very important to the experience that you're going to have.
And if you're looking to support your intuition,
Mhm.
as well.
Yeah.
Whether you think you're intuitive or not, because we're here to tell you you are, you can actually use yoga as a tool to support your intuition and your intuitive development and get a workout at the same time. To close our practice today, I wanted to read a passage. It's called The Four Immeasurables, which is a Buddhist prayer, and it goes as follows. May all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all beings never be parted from freedom's true joy. May all beings dwell in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. Namaste.
Namaste. That reminds me of Joan, that yoga teacher I was telling you about. At the end of all of our sessions, she would read a passage, and it was always like relevant and thought provoking.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. Look for that in your next yoga teacher, everyone.
Mm-hmm. Let's discuss what we've learned this week.
I'm so excited to share with you that I finally learned something that was not about food. In talking with a friend who is living in Europe, we were talking about booking hotels in Europe because if anybody has had this problem, a five-star hotel in Europe is not the same as a five-star hotel in the United States. The trick that she uses is going to booking.com and looking for anything with an 8 plus rating. That will let you know that the hotel that you're staying in Europe is actually what you're looking for. I haven't done it yet, but I've heard that a lot of people are doing this and it's working for them. So you're welcome if it works. And if it doesn't, again, it was my friends and not me.
Christine, we talked about it last time, but this continues. Whatever. Maybe you can't trust what I just said. What I learned this week wasn't related to food, but it was related to where food goes, your mouth. I went to the dentist. I've had some jaw issues, again, related to tension in your neck. And it started, I don't know, maybe coming up on 2 years ago. And I had a bad experience where my jaw like completely locked. I couldn't get it to open to like put food in it. It really got dislodged out of place. And then I was having other issues. And then I talked to my dentist about it. I found by doing yoga, plug, that I was getting rid of some of the tension. It was actually bottom up. The last several months, I've been paying more attention and recognizing, all right, I can now officially confirm it's because of what's happening in the rest of my body. It's not that my mouth is specifically doing something that's causing the jaw issues. It's the tension going up. They brought up apparently what is a TikTok craze for young boys, which I'm not on TikTok, so I don't know this, but it's called mewing. Have you heard of this?
No.
Yep. So it's this British orthodontist, and this was a technique developed in the 90s, actually. And it's making a comeback on TikTok because for young boys, it's essentially engaging the specific muscles in your jaw, neck, using your tongue so that over time it helps to define your jaw. So they're trying to sharpen their jawline. I looked it up because they were recommending it to me essentially as PT for my tongue. Because here's the next part, you can have tooth grinding or jaw tension or TMJ or other issues because when you sleep, your tongue is supposed to be in a certain position. And if it's not properly trained or strong in the ways that it should be, then it actually slides back in your throat. And your body, wanting to make sure you can breathe, tenses up so that it's not blocking your passageways. And then what happens is you're tensing your jaw, your body, and while it's unconscious, is trying to prevent you from not being able to breathe in your sleep or like choking on your own tongue. And then that's what can lead to jaw tightness or issues. So that was very interesting and alarming. So they were recommending it to me and saying, hey, look into it. And we'll talk at the next appointment as well, because the hygienist is doing a course that's discussing it and just different anatomy of the mouth and the tongue. For the listeners, how allegedly you do this, I'm still trying to figure it out. You place your tongue on the roof of your mouth, but you have to make sure it's flat so it doesn't like cup or curve at all. And it's the emphasis on lifting the back of your tongue. That's the key. Another thing to consider is not having your tongue touch your front teeth. So apparently it's a very hard thing to do, and most of the videos when you look it up online are you're doing mewing wrong, this is how you do it, and then you watch a video and it's just some guy sticking his tongue up and you're like, I don't understand what you're doing. I need you to use words to describe it. So I will be looking into this more. But that's what I learned this week.
Wow.
An anatomy lesson for the listeners.
Yeah. Wow is all I can say. The whole time you were talking, I was like, where is my tongue in my mouth? That's mostly what I was focusing on.
Didn't see that one coming, did you?
No, I did not. I did not.
And now for a channeled message for the listeners.
When I first started reading, my reading screen was made out of like a thick layer of rubber. And it was pink, if that matters, but I kept pushing on it. And every time I pushed on it, it would bounce me backwards. I would push on it again, it would bounce me backwards. And I was like, okay, we can't force whatever's happening here. And then I found this gentle solvent and I slowly started putting it over the rubber. And eventually the rubber dissolved. And I was able to step into my reading screen and sort of lay in this yellow, lazy river where everything was just flowy. My body was flowy. The current was flowing. Everything was gentle. And there was a ton of yellow, which to me is a symbol of joy. And the message that I got here is be gentle with yourself. We cannot force everything. Yoga is a practice, it's not a performance. Life is a marathon, not a sprint. So the message that I got here today is enjoy the journey without focusing on the destination. And I think this is coming up for people who are looking to get into yoga and immediately want to be able to do a wild pose where they're balancing on just their pinky toe. Yoga is something that, again, you practice and you work on. You're not going to be the best day one. And the goal of yoga is not to be the best in the class. The goal is to be the best for yourself. The mantra that I came up with for today is just one word, and it's allow. I see the person using this mantra, even just sitting on their yoga mat while they're doing their yoga practice and it's getting really hard, just repeating the words allow over and over and over. And just allow your body to do its thing, allow your muscles to release, allow yourself to be where you are that day. Renee, I'm curious what you got in your reading.
Well, I made a face while you were going over what came through for you, because at the tail end, I also got something that was yellow, but I'll start from the beginning. When I first tapped in, I got the phrase make space, and the meaning of that was directly tied to clearing energy, getting things out of your life, people, objects, clutter, unhealthy situations, clearing it out of your life and opening your heart. And then I saw an image of an arm in a splint, and there was a little red heart drawn on it. And then I got a One Direction song, Throwback, Don't Forget Where You Belong, that just popped right into my head. And especially this line, if you ever feel alone, don't. You were never on your own. From that, I was tapping into it further because, of course, I have this jam stuck in my head. Where do I go from here? I gotta get a message for the collective. And then what came through was the reason that you're not alone is because you always have loved ones to support you. And especially, this was bold capital letters, especially from the other side. People who have passed, whether you've met them or not, who want you to know that they're here and instructing you to look for signs. And what came through as an example for whoever this listener is, I was seeing a yellow daisy from a grandmother. If this resonates with you, that one person it came through.
Thanks for listening.
If you'd like to learn more, the resources we used to prepare for this episode are listed in the show notes.
You can reach me, Christine, at Channeled by Christine with 1L on Instagram.
And you can reach me, Renee, at _read by Renee, or connect with both of us via email at synergytosynastry@gmail.com. Keep your spirit curious and your aura sparkling.
We'll see you when the stars next align.
Yes?
Oh, we're recording. Oh
Yes!
my God. Sorry, so sorry.
I was like, you're so deep in thought. What's happening?
The problem is I read stuff in the same window that this exists, and then I miss the live recording. Anyway, here we go. Welcome back to Synergy to Synastry with Christine and Winnet. Winnet.
One day.
Let me take a sip of water.
Take a sip of water. I should drink some water too. Okay, now you're gonna spit your water up.
Oh my God.
Oh, it started to go down the wrong way.
Winnet.
I shouldn't have made fun of you.
Oh my God, I've never pronounced my R like that. Okay, here we go.